think a lot of times women do overlook men that could be amazing spouse because they don't have the eyes to see them. It's a quick, natural look of that's not who I see myself with, rather than asking God, give me the eyes to see my future spouse.
What's the difference in seeing good fruit and then a guy with just potential that's not going to reach the standard?
I think some of that actually comes through the initial conversations that you can have with them.
Welcome back to the Dear Future Husband podcast, where I'm your host, Christian, and I'm joined by my dear husband.
Dear husband. That's
I always
right.
want to say like current to combat future, but then that sounds really like submissive. Like one day I might be done with you.
Wow.
That's what it sounds like.
I'm your current and I'm still your future.
That is true. I guess I can still call you my future husband. Well, I wanted to bring Arden on today, one, because he's my favorite guest. Two, because he's in the house and I can just rope him in when I get these hard questions that you guys have been asking, like, why are single women not finding any godly men to date? Not even date. They're saying, like, we don't even see any single godly men.
Yeah.
Where are they at, though?
I mean, obviously, I can't speak directly to that. And I mean, in terms of
sorry, guys, cut the episode.
Yeah, the clear answer, I think there's a lot of different reasons behind it. And I think, a similar thing could be said for when I was feeling like I was in the dating period of I didn't feel like there was a lot of good Christian women.
So that's so interesting to me because you traveled, you would go to other churches, like your parents knew people and you still felt that? Yeah.
Well, and I kind of feel like then it all comes down to standards, if I'm being honest with that. Because me just throwing out this blanket statement of, there was no good Christian women, there was good Christian women that I kept finding. But then there's the standards of what I am coming up to in terms of I'm just not seeing these people because they're not coming into my standards that I have set. So in my mind, I'm thinking there are no good Christian women, but yet there are good Christian women. So I think it's like almost reframing that of there is hope, like there is something that's happening, but standards are not a bad thing. It's not saying that you should drop your standards and then you'll find a good Christian man. No, it's believing and knowing, okay, God, the harvest is out there. Maybe just a singular harvest is out there, but God, you need to allow me to have the eyes to see. And I think that's something that we have a hard time doing because like I was saying is, yes, going to multiple different churches, seeing and meeting different women in terms of just interacting with them at the book table and stuff like that. I didn't have the eyes to see until I saw like you or, specific girls. No, I'm saying I went on a date or two before meeting you, but like until I saw those things and those girls, and that does not mean I didn't come across other girls. Now, whether or not I think it's the perception that I had of them or just the judging off of physical attributes, I think that's the harder thing for me to maybe naturally kind of figure out what was the progression there that never walked through.
Well, I don't even think it's a bad thing because I would rather, if I was relating to a friend, I'd rather them have a limited scope than too wide a scope because I think too wide a scope gets messy. It's much harder to discern who should I be with. When I was in internships and things with church, they would almost say like, well, just pick somebody, just find somebody. But I don't think that's actually a great way to see a lifelong partnership, as it should be easy and you should just pick somebody. There should be tons of options and then you just like press the one you want. It should be more of a journey, something that you have to have faith in, something that you have to process through. You have to have, like you're saying, standards or similarities, whatever it might be. So I think it's kind of good. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really good that you didn't have an easy time just finding someone. And it would also make me feel less than.
Yeah, and I'm also like, and I know this is a balance to this, is like it also makes you press in a little bit harder and really believe for that future husband. Now, I will say there's a large portion of men that really need to just step it up. If I'm just being honest, is I think for men, really optimizing what it means to be a man of God, I think is so fluid within this culture in terms of they take these perceptions of like, I'm quoting scripture on Instagram, but yet then I'm doing and going out with anyone and everyone, or I'm following all these little bit scandalous pages and all this stuff is going on. And so it's like, hey, that's a really conflicting message that you're seeing here with these men. And I remember that was something I had to challenge myself on when I was single. It's like, I cannot say I want a future spouse and I want a godly woman and all these things, but then I follow these, women that I'm like, I don't know who these women are, but I think they're attractive, and maybe I'm not saying they're posting terrible stuff, but they're not posting godly stuff. And I'm like, I'm portraying two different people. And that was something I had to challenge myself on and go through and make sure, like, man, am I following people that I align with, and women that I align with, or things that I align with, even on posts that I think are, meme accounts that could turn into something wrong. It's like, I've got to just unfollow that. And so I think there is an element where men need to step up and be more of that. Like, and that's a high call for men too. And if I'm being honest, it's a challenge for men because there's so many things that men navigate and struggle with in that time period of singleness, where they really have to be intentional to keep themselves pure. And that's not a discount for men, or like, oh, it's an example of like what they should be doing. But it's like, it's something that is more of like, men need to see that as a challenge. Like, if I can't just say I'm a man of God and then not follow it up. It's something I have to do. So there's a balance within that and the call to man there. But then there's also a balance to women, is you've got to continue to keep pressing into God and pressing into that God will bring that right person to you, and that you'll have the eyes to see. I think a lot of times women do overlook men that could be amazing spouse because they don't have the eyes to see them. And it's a quick, natural look at things. And I know that might be easy for me to say because I have such a beautiful wife, but it's like, it's a quick, natural look of, oh man, that's not who I see myself with, rather than asking God, give me the eyes to see my future spouse. And then see what God does. It might be that you don't, it's not within your people group or your friend group right now, but it might be that God will bring that person to you, but it's going to cause you to kind of press in a little bit more if you're seeing that guy's not out there.
I have two questions that come to mind as you're sharing what you just shared. One thought, going back on what you said of calling the men to step up, is, I've even seen some people where I'm like, oh, I should recommend this person to my friend, or man, I love what this person's doing, like for the kingdom. And then they'll go off and become unequally yoked, or they'll start living a lifestyle with friends, or like with a new dating partner, where it's just completely contrary to the vision that they had said or portrayed that they wanted. And so I think that is a frustration for single women, is like, well, I thought there was this one guy, but then look who he started dating. And not trying to shame the other woman, but it's like, you said you wanted me to be a godly woman, or I'm trying to be that, but the men I'm seeing are not even going after that. Kind of what we're saying is, women, be ready to have eyes to see and don't settle for that.
Yeah.
But also men, be ready to pursue. And I think that gives a lot of freedom for, okay, if men are feeling challenged of, man, I don't want to look at this stuff, I don't want to become that man.
Well, I don't want to be attracted just to physical things, because men are attracted off of just the physical attributes.
But see that as a challenge. Like, okay, I'm going to rise up, and instead of just feeling, oh, there's something I have to run away from, there's something I'm going to run to. I'm going to run to the ability to pursue a woman. And then from a woman, I don't just want to settle, but I'm actually going to guard my heart. I'm going to feel this righteousness and this virtue that is mine, and wait for the man that's going to show me that he's going to show up. Yeah.
I think, a couple things within that of everything that you're saying is, when I'm saying like men are more attracted to the physical thing, that's the initial attraction. Obviously, like, men will see those things, and that's just their tendency within that. And that's something that men have to grow through. And I'll just be honest with this, is like, there is a lot of men that are content creators or are pursuing God or in colleges and stuff like that. But I need to challenge them to allow their private life and allow the things of their thoughts, like to take, the Bible says, take those things captive. You have to take those things captive. It's not something that will happen accidentally, but it's something that needs to happen intentionally. Of you taking those things captive, you being intentional to set up guards, set up the safe places for you to make sure that you're not going down those roads, that you're not just led by physical attraction or led by these things. I mean, I have had conversations with countless men where I'm like, so you're a Christian, you're a godly man, but why are you following this person? Like, why are you following, and just calling out like this supermodel that posts 50% of her pictures in a bikini? Like, why are you doing that? And it's like, well, the physique is like incredible in terms of like just working out. And I'm like, no, like that's not doing you any good, but yet you continue to keep proclaiming God upon your page. And then yet you're following this. There's very contradicting messages that are being shown. But then even with me saying is like God giving women the eyes to see, is I think this is really important, is that men need growing up to happen. And sometimes it takes a woman to allow that to come and happen naturally. I think men, like, we'd be okay. A lot of men be okay with like us just being like, we love our childhood things. Like, we love, like, we'd be okay with just doing fun stuff with our friends and staying out, like just doing these things that are like, this is just fun. And this is what we've done since we were teenagers, and they're childish things. But then it takes a woman oftentimes to cause a man to mature and grow and call you out of those things. It's not something that a woman should come and do and shame you of those things, but call you out of those things into a greater thing. And that's why the Bible says it's not good for man to be alone. Like, that's why woman was created, to call man out of those things, out of I don't want to say selfish nature on some stuff, but like some of those things that are like, no, I see potential in you and I see a greater thing in you. And that's why I'm saying it's hard for women just to say, well, there's no good men, there's no good Christian men out there, when they're not doing their part of calling the men around them out of the areas that they're participating in and the things that they're doing, and challenging them, not in like hey, you need to do better, but like really like calling those things out of them. In terms of like, man, I see you do this. Like, I see this upon your life, and I see this upon your life. And that could be that, oh yes, let's say you're not dating or something like that. You're just getting to meet someone, but see those things when you're starting to initiate the conversations, or you guys are having conversations. And then if you start seeing the tendencies that he's doing is going back to those things, then start calling him out of that place. Don't point them out and accuse and belittle or things like that. Call him out of those things. Call the things that the man like you want to see him be. And I think that's where the eyes to be able to see comes into play.
Okay, question on that. What's the difference in seeing good fruit that you are, as a woman, are ready to ripen, and then the difference in seeing a guy with just potential that's not going to reach the standard, where a woman does settle?
I think you can tell probably pretty early on if a guy was willing to mature and wants to grow. I think some of that actually comes through the initial conversations that you can have with him. Is if his vision is in terms of small things, or his focuses are in terms of worldly things, then he's not gonna mature past that. But if his vision is beyond him, his vision's beyond the things of this natural world, his vision's beyond greater purpose, whether that's building a company, building something that's big, like it's not just limited to something small, then I think you'll know that he's going to be someone that, as you call those things out of him, that he will want to rise to that occasion, rather than just feeling like you're just pointing out something bad. And I'm comfortable where I am, I'm comfortable in the skin that I have, I'm comfortable in the things which he needs to be. And you have to create that safe place. Like, that is a thing, is, men will have small things that they're like, I need this as a decompression, whether that's like maybe a game or something like that, where it's like, I need to have this as decompression. And he needs to feel safe that like you can be okay with those things, but also you can't keep him there, and you have to call them out of those things. And I know that's probably a small like little snippet of that in terms of those things.
I feel like we're getting into the once you're dating a little bit, but that's a good perspective going in. I think the difference with potential is Like he might look like what you think, he might sometimes act like what you hope for, but it's not consistent. Whereas a guy with good fruit, he already has consistencies, he already has some seeds of vision, but it just needs to ripening. So potential is where we're like, well, I can work with this, and fruit is, I can see that growing. Like I get to partner with something already there that I see a vision on, what Arden's saying, that I can see. Like I think God gives us eyes to see people in his light, especially as we're praying for them. Like if you're praying for your future husband, you're going to be able to see, oh man, there's so much potential on this guy's life. And I remember even on our first dates, there's things that you were telling me, a vision that you had so much seeds for. And I would say, I mean, I count myself very lucky. I would say you started leaps and bounds ahead of what I had seen previously from other people. So I really got an easy job in our first years of getting to challenge and champion you. But even some of those things, they were still dreams. They were seeds in form, and we got the benefit of partnering together. So,
and we're still talking about some of those things.
But you clearly had vision. I wasn't like, hey, I want to go to church. Will you go to church with me? Hey, I want to have a family. Will you? Like I wasn't trying to get you on board with my idea, but I was seeing that, that age-old analogy. Like if we keep running our race, are we going to align? Are you already running, or are you dragging your feet?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great analogy too. Is like, if you're someone who runs the 400, don't find someone who's running the 100. Like they're going to start way before you, and you're going to be like, come on, keep going. But their mindset is just, oh, I only have a race to run 100 meters. That's it. And you're like, no, we have a full race. We're running around the entire track. We're going to run a full 400. Like, see where they are and see, is this something that I'm coming to alignment to? Or is this someone that's like, if I see them as, oh, they're okay right now at stopping at 100. But if down the road, 2 months from now, if I challenge them to keep coming and keep running and calling those things of God out of them, calling that potential. Because the thing is, a lot of men just have never had that. And me coming from, all boy family and entering into girl world, is there are things that women challenge you on that you don't get challenged on as a guy. And I'll be honest, like the things of conversation and talking through emotions and stuff like that stuff, it's like, man, us brothers, we just punch each other and we're good. Like you're fine. You don't need to go talk through those things. You can't punch me
to get through our conflict.
Yeah, and then it's like when it becomes a thing, it's really big. But then you can talk. We figured out ways to talk through it. But it was always something that was like it built up over time. But normally our quick fixes were, physical quick fixes. Whereas women, it was challenging of like, oh man, this is hard to work through these things. This is challenging in terms of an emotional and a mental status of how do I process this? And then how does that make me process the emotions that I'm feeling and navigate those things? And then it causes me to grow. And I'm not like going to this place, and I'm still working on my emotions and being able to process not process those, but to be able to show them, I think, because I just don't do a good job. I think I do a good job of processing emotions. I just don't do a good job of showing emotions. Yeah. Yes, I do solo process my emotions. But I'm just saying it challenged me in an area that I was not ever challenged in. And I think that's something good. And that's also something that you can do as friends. I'm not saying that it's like, okay, I see potential on him, so I got to start dating him for 2 months, and then we'll see if I can get him to grow. And if he doesn't, then I'm going to drop him. It's like, no, you can do that as friends. And I think oftentimes that's also why a lot of people like that route of being friends first, because they're like, man, I see a lot of potential in this person, or I maybe see potential in this person. And they want to see, can those things be called out? Yeah.
Or if you're a guy or a girl, start doing that with your friends. So when your spouse comes along, it's just like, oh, this is a new method and a new version of something I've been trying to grow in already.
Yeah. The other thing too is, and this is kind of shifting gears, but like women need to speak these things into existence. Like there is power in your words, in speaking those things into existence. I have a friend who would tell me for years, he just was like, I feel like I don't have any friends. And I remember just being like, all right, let's pray those friends into existence. And I watched as not only did he have tons of friends in the coming years that just came alongside of him and had such a great and rich community that one started very local, then two started just expanding where his friends were just connections all over the United States that were deep friends. And this one got so intentional. But then two, is God gave him a great revelation around friendship. And I watched that happen because he saw, I don't have any friends. And he cried out to God, like, God, give me friends. But not only that, God, give me the revelation of how do I become a good friend. And I think it can be easy just to be like, oh, there's no good guys out there. There's no good girls out there, or I'll say godly men, godly women. And it's like, that's easy just to sit there, but call it out to existence. Like, start praying those things around there of like, God, I pray that you're going to bring to me, maybe not just a future husband. Like, no, you're going to bring to me a community of godly men and women that I can be around, that I can have friends with, and see what goes from there.
Yeah. A career, a church, restoration for my family, whatever it is. Yeah, call it out, pray for it. That's why I love the prayer model, not just because it's like a genie in a bottle. And I've said this so many times. It's not a genie in a bottle to try to get your man here, but it helps you speak and partner with God into the things that you're believing for. And it's an activation of faith that we don't get just by longing, but in actually, in a way, creating the realities we hope to see. So to recap, what we've said so far is, if you're a woman that thinks I can't find any great men, start looking for the good men that have good fruit and begin praying, okay, God, how are you calling me to challenge, equip, and partner with my future husband, and begin to give me ways to do that as we date. And if someone's not rising to that same mindset, they're not showing those fruits, and that's great. You know what? Maybe you as a friend invested in someone, but keep that vision, stick to it, and start activating it now instead of just waiting. Well, the perfect guy has to show up, and then our marriage is going to be perfect. No, like, your marriage starts in singleness. It starts in singleness. It enriches in dating. It's challenged in engagement a lot of times.
Your marriages too is like a continual work. I think that's the issue too, is like, you're like, well, I don't want to work on this, but yet when you get to marriage, you're going to have to keep working on it. Yeah. So like, you're going to have to keep calling these things out of each other. You're going to have to keep challenging each other. That's why so many marriages don't finish well, is because they stop putting in the effort and the work. It's
such that Christmas Day mentality of like, you hype it up. Christmas Eve, you're like shaking the box, wanting to know what's in the present. And then Christmas happens. You play with your gifts for a few hours when you're a kid. And it's like, meh, okay, that was it. And that's what people think of marriage, I think, oftentimes, because we overemphasize what it could be, what it could do for us, rather than what we can do in it and for it.
Yeah.
We've set that out there for women to have the vision. I want to know, practically, let's say they're not getting asked out on dates yet, or there's a guy they're interested in, they're waiting around. What's some good practices for them to be doing, or even places to be? Because I think the thought is, well, if I'm going to find a godly guy, I have to go make it happen. I have to get on the dating apps, or I have to like really put myself out there, which, you know, that's neither here nor there. We can talk about that in a different conversation. But what are the good practices?
Yeah.
I mean, church, community, we've kind of said that.
Yeah, I think obviously being plugged into a great community is a really practical thing. I think it's really hard to find a great guy if you're constantly in the same spheres. Like, you're going to work, or you work from home, you don't go out, you're doing the same thing. I think that was something my mom always used to challenge us boys on, is Austin,
because y'all would go to the gym for just 2 hours.
Yeah,
after school.
we would go to work, and then we would go to work, and we'd get home at 5. We'd eat dinner, and then we'd go to the gym for an hour and a half, and then we'd come home and we'd go to bed. And like, that was our routine. And then obviously traveling every now and then. But my mom was like, you're not going to meet anyone by just doing this. And we were just kind of set in that motion, and that was just kind of we knew what we were supposed to be doing, which was our job and our commission, and then we wanted to work on bettering ourselves. So we were like,
hey, I'm grateful for
we're going to the gym, and that's what we enjoyed to do, but we just never got outside of that scope. So that's what caused, a little bit of like, even me finding Christian on social media was, I'm like, I don't really get outside of my scope, outside of just maybe
you don't
going
even get
to
on Instagram much, actually.
No, not at all. And so that was kind of where that happened. And I guess that I could say was the community per se. Now I do feel like we got a little bit, I don't want to say lucky, but we were just very intentional with that community. And you have to be careful on something that's like an online platform, regardless if it's a dating platform or anything like that. I'm not saying those are bad things. I think those are great, but you have to be careful. You don't want it to go too emotional, too fast, over messaging and stuff like that. So I think that's good. So finding communities that you actually can be in to get you out there, to meet new people, because there is so many people out there. Like, I think that, it's like there's 8 billion people right on Earth, planet Earth, and I'm just like, there's people around you. There's men who are saying there's no good godly women out there. There's women who are saying there's no good godly men out there, and I'm like, no, there is.
Yeah,
you just gotta find them.
Still want to do our matchmaking singles event.
Yeah,
one day. We've talked about that a couple times, so like, put it in the comments if you really want to see that happen. But here's a question: is it wrong to I'll say it. Is it wrong to try to go to a church with a thriving, like, young adults ministry because you think, oh, maybe I'll meet someone there?
I don't think it's wrong, but I also think if you're plugged into a church already, I wouldn't
just go to the hippest.
I wouldn't just go to the hippest church, because that is the thing. It's like we cannot be people that are just going to churches as in terms of, like, we heard a great message about this. It's like, that's the new biggest thing. And I think in the day and age where people are not committing to stuff, like, the one thing you should be really committed to is your church. And so if it works out that you're like, oh, I go 9 a.m. service here, and then I go to 11 a.m. service this church, that's great. But stay true to the church that you're at. If you're just like, man, my church doesn't have good young single guys, but yet I'm getting fed, and this church has done so much, do not leave that church. Like, that's not a good reason. Don't leave your commitment
to try to find a commitment.
Yeah. Go to 9 o'clock at your church, and then go to the 11 at some other church that you think is good, or go to the Saturday night service, Wednesday night service. I think that's completely fine, but just don't run away from your commitment to your church just to find a spouse. I think that's really, really going to be the most important thing. It's kind of leaving, almost like what we're saying is like running the race. This is your spiritual race that you're running. This is your race that you're running. Don't leave that race to go find someone. Come and see who's running with you, who's running their race. They might be committed to another church, and they're faithfully going, and it's like, great. You would want them to be faithfully going to a church.
I think this has been great for encouraging women and empowering men. I want to ask one more thing on that ladder real quick. What are you going to say? I just want you to, like, speak to the men out there, the ones that we've talked about, the ones that are saying they want a godly wife but aren't quite living to that standard. But what about the other guys that are saying, I'm content in singleness, but maybe they're scared to put themselves out there, or they're just not actually pursuing women? Maybe they're like the guy in the Christian friend group that's like kind of flirty, not committing. What would you say to them to get them over the hurdle of, hey, you actually should pursue someone if this is a calling on your heart? Don't be scared. Don't just play the friend card.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think through, because, like, there's a balance of, there's people who just really think, men that are like, I just don't want to be in a relationship, and that's okay if that's what you're deciding. But then if you're a man out there that you're kind of constantly flirting, and you're like, I want to be in a relationship, but I like to be single, and I like to be single and just continue to keep playing the field, then I would say you're missing out on what God has for you. If you have an intent to be married someday, that there is something so special and elevating in terms of marriage that will grow you as an individual. That's growth that can only happen when you get married. I think about it in terms of, like, when we first got married, I realized really quickly how selfish I was, and just in terms of how I ran so much through a filter of just, how does this affect me? Then you have to run it now through a filter of, how does this affect Christian and me. And then you have a kid and it's like, okay, now how do I affect this? Is like my decision to go play golf. That's affecting a lot of people within this. And it's not just a really quick decision. And that causes some maturity and growth that happens. And so for men, it's just like, there's no point to play the field. Enjoy. I'm not saying, man, if you're 22, you need to hurry up and get married. But I'm saying, begin to interact those godly behaviors right now, because they're not just going to switch on when you get married. Your mindset's not just going to switch when you get married. Those are things that you have to begin to start working on right now in your single time of honoring, respecting women.
Or when you meet the right girl.
Yeah.
It's how you interact with all women.
Yes, correct. It's compounding those things over time so that when you get to that moment, how old you are when you get married, that you can do that. But I think it's okay too, on the flip side of that, I think it's okay not to rush into something, but to enjoy a single time. I will say that. I think sometimes we skip over singleness and we forget that it's actually a gift as well. And marriage is a gift, but singleness is a gift. So finding that balance to that, and same thing for women, is enjoy singleness. Like it is a gift. Do not just rush from one thing to the next thing, and do not just use this time period to feel like I'm missing out on something and all I want is this other thing. It's like, no, God's given you this as a gift. Utilize it. Utilize your time. Utilize your talents in this season, but prepare yourself for the next.
It's so good. Well, coming from our unofficial co-host of the Dear Future Husband podcast, my husband, Arden, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. And if you're liking these conversations, or there are keen topics that you just want a male's perspective on, feel free to leave those in the comments, send us a message, leave a rating, and in that you can share more. But we want to hear from you, and we want to keep having these conversations so ultimately we can have better single gift seasons, amazing dating, and thriving, lasting, long marriages. Be sure to join us back by subscribing, and we'll see you next time.